Welcome to the Wake Before the Day podcast with my parents, Clark and Bobby. We're excited to talk about the Bible and the Holy Spirit adventures. Thanks for listening.
What's up, friends and family? Welcome to the Wake Before the Day podcast. Bobby and I are with you today. We're studying the book of Proverbs, and we're looking at Proverbs chapter 17. Just as you look at this chapter, you'll notice that a lot of the verses are standalone verses, and so we're going to ping pong it back and forth. Bobby's going to take verse 1. I'll take verse 2. Pickleball it back and forth. Bing, bing, bing. We'll go from there.
Verse 1 sounds like this: better a dry crust with peace and quiet than a house full of feasting with strife. So that's a funny picture there, dry crust.
Bobby has a line she uses at our house often,
it's
talking to our children.
Funny. Yeah. I know, because if you've ever seen the old Beauty and the Beast, and I know there's like a newer human one, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the animated one.
The OG cartoon, yes,
where Cogsworth says a line when Belle is in the castle. And I think Mrs. Potts like wants to feed her dinner. It's right before the big special, like Be Our Guest song.
Great song.
And Cogsworth agrees to finally let Belle come down to the kitchen, but he says only for a crust of bread and a glass of water. And so whenever our kids are like, you know, in trouble or like we just ate dinner and they want a snack right out.
Which happens like every night, 5 minutes after dinner.
You can have a crust of bread. Anyway.
Drink of water. That's why Bobby got verse 1 today.
I am so blessed to talk about this, but it is a funny picture.
It's wisdom. It's from the Bible. It's biblical.
Yes.
That's where Beauty and the Beast got it from.
Exactly. Well, and the picture
what
here
does it
is
mean,
like
actually?
even this like crust of bread, as long as it like has peace and there's quiet, is better than, you know, this huge mansion or feast if there's striving there, if there's strife there. And so when you think about the picture that this presents, we've talked about this before, and I'm sure you can feel it in your own home, or if you've been in maybe someone else's home at times and you walk in, it's like, man, there's just conflict, there's disconnect, there's something that's not like resonating and doesn't maybe feel good. And we've talked about this, and when it comes to family warmth, how really you have to be intentional with family warmth. You need to be a peacemaker. You need to be someone who's able to extend forgiveness and extend grace within your home. And then you can tell the homes that are places of peace. That's like a huge desire for our house, is that it would be a sanctuary that, you know, within our own family, us 8, that even though it's chaotic and there's a lot going on, that it would still be a place of peace, that it would be a place where we can experience kindness and forgiveness and love toward one another. And so there's a peace in this picture that we need to protect, the peace inside of your home with those relationships, and it's felt by other people, and it's a good thing, even if it's just a crust of bread.
Cup of water. Yeah. All right, verse 2. Verse 2 continues. It says, a prudent servant will rule over a disgraceful son and will share the inheritance as one of the family. Now, the truth is, it's usually a biological family that are the recipients of one's trust, will, and estate. However, the Proverbs are telling us at times family are irresponsible. They make bad decisions. And I've seen examples in my life of people who have, not servants necessarily today, but non-blood family or non-blood friends, like joining the ranks of their work and then being loyal, faithful, and then being given more responsibility over the course of time. Now, I'm thankful to say that the vast majority of our friends in the community we have that have legacy companies, meaning I guess from generation to generation, inter-family, have done a great job of not pampering and coddling the next generation, but they've actually taught them a God-honoring work ethic. And so there's no nepotism. It's actually like there's effort, I would say even it's earned at times when it comes to getting degrees or working or paying your dues within the company. But what's really especially cool is within these legacy companies, we've also seen people that have been faithful and loyal rise up, get promoted, and are eventually on boards or CEOs, CFOs, whatever, and are just fully invested in the company. And for us, we know they love Jesus and they have the same mission. So when you go to the New Testament, just a couple of New Testament connections to think through in this verse. Matthew 20, verses 26 through 27, Jesus redefines greatness. And he says greatness comes through servanthood. And really, that's kind of that kingdom of God promotion. Jesus came to be one who serves. Secondly, in Luke 16, that is the parable, the story where Jesus talks about when you are faithful with a little, you'll be given much more. And so that's something that comes to my mind when I think about verse 2.
Verse free.
Verse free. By verse free, I mean verse 3.
The crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the heart. And so this is just an appropriate picture of testing and how, within different kinds of metal, there's different ways that it needs to be refined. And when it comes to our hearts, that's all up to the Lord and what that looks like. So often, you've said this in a sermon, we laugh about it sometimes, but we'll bring ourselves to the Lord and ask for patience or ask, to be grown in this area. And what comes sometimes in our lives is someone maybe who's really irritating into our life. And then we have, a series of events, or we go through a season where there might be some friction. And in that, we kind of wonder sometimes like, okay, Lord, what's going on? Like, this is such an irritating and frustrating season. And I just picture the Lord just smiling and saying like, this is like a test. This is a refinement for your patience. Yeah. And so is that what it looks like all the time? No. But this is one of those things that we just hold up to the Lord when it comes to testing and the different seasons and trials in life. And there have definitely been times in my life where I look back and I think, oh, yeah, I think that actually was a test that I stepped into, and I don't think I did very well. And so the Lord is gracious to meet us in the middle of it and to bring us through. That's the thing. Like when you look back to different biblical passages in the Old Testament, there's just this big, huge truth about the nature of God is that He is with us, that He wants to be with us through these times, through these tests, and through these trials. It also is true in the New Testament. How these trials, how the Lord's with us and how they can produce things. So like maturity in James chapter 1, verses 2 and 4. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7 talk about faith being refined like gold, how there is a process actually that we walk through with the Lord. And then Romans chapter 5, verses 3 through 5 talk about suffering and how suffering produces things also. It produces character, and that produces hope. And so there's this formational piece in our walk with the Lord that you could use the word testing in, that there are tests, that we mature, that things are produced, that good fruit is produced. The Lord produces these things in us over time. And so it's just like these tests with silver and just like these tests with gold. The truth is that God is refining the things that He loves. He's refining us. He's refining our hearts for His good.
Yeah. Keep going. Verse number 4 says, a wicked person listens to deceitful lips. A liar pays attention to a destructive tongue. Those who lie like to listen to lies and gossip. One of the very simple lines is that lies travel around the world a lot faster than truth does. It's unfortunate, but that is our reality oftentimes, and it's not always a gift or a blessing. Rarely is it.
Verse 5, whoever mocks the poor shows contempt for their maker. Whoever gloats over disaster will not go unpunished. Remember all the way back in Genesis, how every person is made in the image of God. That is the basis when these things come up within our family, or how if there's a moment or a joke, or maybe there's even the potential, like something happened and it's like, how are we going to speak about that? That is such a good base to start from, that like, oh, no, this person's actually, this person actually has great value and worth in the eyes of the Lord. He's made them in His image. And then from there too, we need to remember that when others fail, that shouldn't make us happy. When others fail, that we can come alongside.
That's a hard one. I'm being honest right now. I'm being honest. Our friend Andy preached an awesome sermon this year, and in it he talked about this. And I think if we're all being honest, moment of vulnerability here, whether it's like sports teams or just entertainers or other people, that in my flesh sometimes when I see them lose, it's like, yes.
Well, my favorite videos sometimes, and this might say something about me, but I will laugh 100% of the time if you show me these like fail compilations like
I didn't make the Olympic team. If you ever want a good laugh, what's that? What's the title of those videos? Like, why I didn't make the Olympic team or something like that?
Yes.
People on the diving board, people whatever. Is this good for the laughter? Is good for the soul.
So the heart there. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not laughing at the heart there. Coming into these though is not like, oh, it's a personal jab. Let me laugh with you. I don't know. I believe that maybe this person consented and put this on the internet for our enjoyment. That's what I believe in.
I like
That's
to think
my heart.
that too.
So there is another heart though.
Yeah.
And that heart posture is, I'm going to actually take great joy in your failure.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about in
That's
Proverbs.
not the way of Jesus. All right, verse 6. It says, children's children are a crown to the aged, and parents are the pride of their children. One might ask, what makes grandchildren so special? Well, the glory of children is their parents. And honestly, I've heard this. I'm not a grandparent yet. Hopefully, I'm not a grandparent for a while. But when I am a grandparent, I'm going to love it. And I've heard people in my family talk about like this new role that they have and how it's extra special, and like the ability for one's heart to grow and their capacity to love. It happens when these little people are brought into your family. And then, especially as a grandparent, you're especially proud of your kids. And now you're proud of your grandkids. And you get to love them and pour out love to them, have special time, and then send them home with mom and dad. Like it's, there's a special role grandparents have where they're able to come in, and it's really, it is substantial, and it is important, and it's also kind of like the icing on the cake at times. Because mom and dad are really in the trenches doing a lot of the work. They come alongside mom and dad and affirm it, but get to do so often in such a blessing and a loving and a fun way. But it also says here on the back end of this verse that parents are the pride of their children. And this is how it's meant to be. It's mothers and fathers who point us towards Jesus, and they protect and they provide and they nurture and they nourish. We should love them, we should admire them, we should look up to them. And then the picture that is given in this one verse here is a generational and a legacy of blessing.
Yeah.
And so for some of you watching and listening right now, this is your story. And for you, I would say, praise God. Now it's your job to take that baton and make the legacy continue by God's grace, hand it on to the next generation. If you're watching and listening to this and you're like, I can't relate to that verse at all. I've had a horrible experience with my earthly family. I would say, well, now's the time to break that generational curse, if you would say, and by God's grace, start something new and start new traditions and disciple differently and prioritize things that are of the kingdom. And that you're going to be the patriarch or the matriarch of a new thing that God's doing in your family.
That's good. Verse 7 sounds like this. Eloquent lips are unsuited to a godless fool. How much worse lying lips to a ruler. Wow. Okay. So nowadays, it's kind of one of those things when it comes to leaders. They use the word rulers here, but just the people who have influence, that it's pretty commonplace that we're seeing, moral failure or something happen ethically within people who are leading. And Tim and Kathy Keller have this great quote that I'll read to you guys. The most powerful leaders are those whom people trust so much that they want to follow them. The New Testament tells church leaders to not lord it over those entrusted to you, but to be examples. You can have trustworthy character and not have gifts or skills to be a strong leader, as we will see. But the reverse is not true. You cannot be a real leader without character that all can see, respect, and therefore trust. And so that quote sums it up really well, but a lot of the Proverbs are saying this when it comes just how to live in general, and specifically now with leaders, that it has to be a match with how you're walking and talking.
Yeah.
What's seen on your private life is seen in your exterior life. What's seen in your inner life is seen on your outer life. And so here it is too, when it comes to leading specifically, it's not about lording things over, it's not about control or manipulation. It's about, hey, I'm following Jesus. You want to come along and follow me and walk with me as I follow Jesus. And you can't do that with just words alone.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, we don't know the inner workings of other people's lives, and we read these articles or things that have happened in other places. And so we don't know the whole story, but I do think there are commonalities when it comes to accountability, when it comes to saying and not doing things. And so a good word here just about transparency and how we can move forward and have interior lives that really glorify and love the Lord, that show on the exterior. And that's a gift to people around you in your community and eventually people who follow you too.
Yeah.
So that's a good word from Tim and Kathy.
Absolutely. Verse 8 continuing says, a bribe is seen as a charm by the one who gives it. They think success will come at every turn. Just to clarify, a bribe is not recommended here. It's not blessed, but the cold, hard truth is that bribes often move people to take action. I was talking to someone recently who was frustrated with an experience at a school because one family was a large donor, and the kids who were not as gifted, and nor did they work as hard as other kids, were given prominent positions on this team. And there's a sadness there. And you see, okay, we've all seen how this works. We've seen this in politics, especially at times in other organizations as well. This is not the way God calls us to operate, just like Bobby said in the prior verse. Transparency is so important and will put out any kind of gossipy fire and on any kind of skepticism when it comes to authority and leadership when you're walking open-handed and there's great transparency.
We got to keep going or we're going to be here for 45 minutes. So here we go. Verse 9, whoever would foster love covers over an offense, but whoever repeats the matter separates close friends. And so there's something here when it comes to patterns and how we operate here. So whoever repeats the matter when it comes to an offense will separate close friends. There's a time and place to expose sin. Ephesians 5:11 says this, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. And so there's something here when it comes to us graciously dealing with the log in our own eye and also graciously walking in relationship with other sinners around us.
Yeah.
And so we need to know, that things are going to happen and humans are sinful. And so in relationship, we walk graciously with one another and we can forgive. But if there's patterns happening, if you're in a friendship or in a relationship and you're seeing things happening time and time again, then that might be an invitation there to consider, is this a relationship I want to continue?
Yep.
If you're continually meeting them, the 90%, if there's just habitual sin happening, obviously be open to correction in your own life. And then we would hope that for people we want to be in a relationship with, that they will be open to correction, that they can be welcomed back in. But if that's not happening, then there's times to separate too.
Yeah. All right, verse 10. A rebuke impresses a discerning person more than 100 lashes of fool. What this is saying here is a rebuke and correction offered to a wise person should actually be seen as a tremendous gift.
Yeah.
Meaning when you have someone come into your life and say, hey, I love you, I noticed this, and I think we could do a little better here, or here's where I could see a growth area or an area for improvement. Receive that as a gift because we should want to improve and grow and not be stagnant. A fool, though, doesn't receive that as a gift. No. It takes it personal, doesn't apply the teaching or correction to them, will probably continue to make the same mistakes. And it seems like hitting rock bottom at times, and our error just isn't enough. And so we're asking, Holy Spirit, would you move in our hearts? Would you move us to receive this correction and teaching so that we can learn from those around us? Now, for me, I would say I have been blessed with far more biblically kind, Christ-centered people speaking into my life, correcting me, challenging me, rebuking me, than not.
Agreed.
I also know that some of you would say, I don't have very many of those people in my life. And that's where I would say then try to get connected into the local church. Surround yourself with godly authority, godly leadership, and ask them to speak into your life. And I promise you, they'll point you to Jesus, love you and encourage you, and tell you the truth.
Verse 11, evildoers foster rebellion against God. The messenger of death will be sent against them. And so what we read here is that there's repeated rebellion sometimes, and there is, a holy judgment from our holy God in that. And so this is different than what we're talking about when it comes to repentance and then turning the other way and walking with the Lord. When it comes to fostering rebellion against God, what we need to understand is that God is loving and merciful, and God is just. God is holy, and he holds these things together perfectly. So for us to be in relationship with him, we need to understand that his nature is actually so imperative that it's both of those things, because it wouldn't be good if he was just loving. Yeah. It wouldn't be good if he was just. And so because he's both of those things, then we can trust him with futures that look unknown. We can trust him when it seems like there's injustice on our side. We can trust him when it seems like, things have gone totally astray and there's things that are definitely unloving happening, because he's both loving and just. And so even, in the New Testament, you read about the formation of the church and how one of the calls there is to be holy. Be holy like I'm holy.
Yeah.
And so the Lord is sure to do that in his bride.
Yeah.
And so we can trust him to do that, because he's not gonna have rebellion against him.
Yeah. Verse 12, I've unfortunately almost lived this out. Better to meet
Yes.
a bear robbed of her cubs than a fool bent on folly. A couple years ago at the college retreat up in the mountains at nighttime, I had to meet up with one of our leaders, get the battery for the walkie-talkie, and I turned the corner by my car, and there was a large black bear. Now, it wasn't a brown bear, but it was a large black bear. And by a large black bear, I mean a couple 100 pounds still, and way bigger than like a German Shepherd or a Great Dane or whatever. It was substantial. So of course you freeze. You're looking at each other. I was with one other guy, and this bear within like 1 second leapt and bounded towards the front of my car and up a tree. So being really wise and intentional and smart, which is words I'd use to describe myself, we turn our flashlights on and we stand under the tree and are looking up to see how did that thing climb the tree?
And they're trying to videotape.
So hard. Yeah, I did. I got a video of it. And we're looking up there, and all of a sudden we're looking and we realize that there are cubs up in the tree. And we're just like, wow, look at that. And all of a sudden this thing bounded down the tree. Thank God the guy next to me had sandals on. I had shoes. I was like, I'm gone. Phew, I'm not going, I'm going home. And we got away. We got away. And it was good, but it was one of those things where it's like, I don't care, what you're doing. The mama cub is going to win every time. Don't go near her cubs. And what it's saying here is, a fool bent on folly is a very dangerous person to be around.
Yeah.
There's no making sense. There's no logic. It's irrational and actually dangerous. So keep your space from people like this.
Verse 13, evil will never leave the house of one who pays back evil for good. So if you want change, if you want something to look different, then stop rewarding immorality. We need to trust God in his timing, and we also need to step in and do our part for what we're responsible with. So if you need, to move in a way for change, then we need to move that way. Don't just let things continue to stay the same. Verse 14.
Verse 14 says, starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam, so drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. The imagery given here is that once water breaks out of a dam, you're not controlling it. It is going, and it is going to make a mess, and will be potentially a devastation. Chaos will ensue. Yeah. So there's great wisdom in confronting tension and dysfunction earlier on to avoid any kind of volcanic-like eruption. And when we do marital counseling with other people from the church, when we try to live this out ourselves, or even at work or with friendships, handle things when they're minor, when they're this big. If something happens, bring it up, talk about it before things stack, and then it feels like Mount Vesuvius is going off.
Verse 15, acquitting the guilty and condemning the innocent. The Lord detests them both. So we understand here that justice requires that the wicked be condemned and that the innocent are exonerated. When there is no justice, it goes against everything God stands for. So this goes back and echoes that rebellion against God verse in verse 11. And what we understand here is there is a way to move forward. There is a way to walk where people are held accountable, and where people who have no responsibility, then they get to walk in freedom. And so that's just part of us playing our part in creation too, when it comes to, making peace and being, people who speak up for the voiceless or the fatherless. So this is echoing that. There's also a quote from, what commentary is this quote
Nycott, the New International Commentary of the Old Testament.
This
Bruce
proverb.
Waltke.
That's it.
Bruce Waltke is his
This
name.
proverb corrects the popular misconception that it is better to set free 10 guilty persons than to condemn one innocent person. Both are an abomination to the Lord.
Good job, Bruce. Good job, Bobby. Verse 16, why should fools have money in hand to buy wisdom when they are not able to understand it? Because the truth is, wisdom comes at a price, and it begins with the fear of the Lord, which also requires one to acknowledge our sin, our inability, and our need for him to come in and help us. So God calls us to have a teachable and a spirit of humility, to be open to what we can change and areas we can grow in, and a fool doesn't have these things. So don't be a fool. Holy Spirit, keep us teachable.
A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. That's verse 17. So a true friend doesn't only love when it's easy, but sticks through thick and thin. I think that's what you're talking about too when it comes to blood relationships versus relationships that have been born through just loyalty and sticking with each other. So there can be times where the biological relationship really doesn't pan out. And we've seen that biblically, when you read about Cain and Abel, when you read about what happened there. I think this is just a good call to reflect on what do my relationships look like?
Yeah.
Who are people that I actually want to have in my life that are upholding the Lord, but that are also pointing me to the Lord? So often, you can have brothers that are actually cousins and brothers that are actually friends, and then brothers in your life that are not like that. And so we just think that this is a good call to sit and examine and look at those relationships and see how we can uphold them.
One of the things we can reflect on is like, how many friends do I actually have?
Sure.
And how many friends do I actually need? I heard someone say recently, I really liked what she said. She's actually a teacher at our kids' school. She said one of her kids would rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies when it comes to friends. And I was like, I've never heard that before. That's really good. And sometimes you just need those people that are going to be in the trenches in the foxhole with you. And if you have a couple, you're going to be set. Verse 18, one who has no sense shakes hands in a pledge and puts up security for a neighbor. One of the general true statements that is said throughout the Proverbs is don't make foolish partnerships. Don't sign your name. Don't give out loans. Don't attach yourself to people that you don't know well. Don't take on debts for other people. When you haven't thought through these things and understood what's really going on, because you're going to be putting your name on the line for somebody else. There might be some appropriate times to do that, but generally speaking, it is usually an unwise thing to do.
Verse 19 says this, whoever loves a quarrel loves sin. Whoever builds a high gate invites destruction. So you and I know people like this in our lives. Maybe you're one of these people. I think at times maybe I've been it. But there's just something about you that wants to hear about the drama of what's going on. Maybe it has nothing to do with you. That's an invitation then for you to pray or step away. Because when it comes to, we've heard quarrel, we've heard strife, we've heard conflict or destruction. If this is just about drama, if this is just about gossip or you knowing something about somebody else, well, then that's your invitation to step away.
Yeah.
And so there are some people, though, in our lives, too, that, they just want to know. Or you have a situation and they use that cliche Christian language, that they're just praying for X, Y, Z. And you and I both know, if we have discernment, Holy Spirit's with us, we can know when to step in and when to step out. And this verse is just reminding us that, sometimes about building the high gates, sometimes we might want to promote that dysfunction or protect what's going on. And that's not honoring the Lord. That's not honoring the Lord. And so a good verse here to really self-examine and think, what does that look like in my life?
Yeah.
Am I someone who's promoting that? Am I protecting that? Do I like to be near a quarrel? Because that's not the gospel. That's not keeping peace.
For sure.
It's a good reminder.
Verse 20, one whose heart is corrupt does not prosper. One whose tongue is perverse falls into trouble. One who's filled with deceit will only find trouble, and it might look like for a while that money's made or success is experienced, but the truth is at the end of the day, it comes at a price. We might not always see that price. There are times we get to peer back behind the curtain and acknowledge like this is reality for those people. They might be famous, but I would never want that life. And things have been compromised and integrity has been flushed down the toilet. And there's a price to be paid is what this verse is getting at.
Yeah. Verse 21, to have a fool for a child brings grief. There is no joy for the parent of a godless fool. So that's just a plain statement about the pain of parenting and child rearing, when someone is just walking in the way of the fool. And so as, we have both perspectives. You probably do. Like as we were children being raised up in our homes, what was that like? And then now as we're parenting, what is that like? How do we actually, raise up these kids in the way of the Lord? There's another proverb about that too. Lots of proverbs actually about parenting. What does that practically look like inside of your home? What does mealtime look like? What does times of discipline look like? What does your weekly worship rhythm look like? When it comes to discipleship, what does that live like? When it comes to topics that, are not often talked about in the church, money, sex, relationships, what does that look like? When it comes to parenting, that's your primary focus is discipleship. How do we walk together toward the Lord.
Isn't there like it's like a principle of like being the first one to talk about something is the one that's most remembered.
Yeah, so there's lots of different writing about that,
Yeah.
but that's one thing that I think that, we have tried to err in when it comes to being the first person. We call it like being on the offense.
Yeah.
So sometimes, things happen and hopefully your kids bring that to you and ask, hey, this happened, what should we do? Sometimes that doesn't even happen. But before that even happens, we like to be on the front end and say, hey, this is what this word means. And that might be a bad word, but we're going to talk about it when it's appropriate with our kids.
And I think a lot of parents think, there's no way little Johnny or Timmy or Sally is exposed to this. And the truth is, they are. Like, kids
100%.
today are being exposed to things far
Way
earlier
younger.
than we were.
Yeah.
And so we have to have and get the privilege of having some of these conversations earlier than we might have wanted to.
Yes.
Verse 22, a cheerful heart or a joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. When I read this, I thought about Pete Scazzero's work in emotionally healthy spirituality. And in it, his point is that we're integrated beings, meaning that we have an emotional, a social, an intellectual, a spiritual, and a physical component to our life. And so these things interact with one another. And his point in the book really is you can't be emotionally unwell and spiritually wise. Those things are handcuffed to each other. And they'll grow together, or you'll hit a ceiling and you won't grow any farther.
Yeah.
And then what the Bible has taught and has been confirmed by science is that, again, our emotional well-being and our physical well-being are deeply connected. And so this isn't something new. This is something that God has spoken about through the biblical writers for a long time. 17th century minister Richard Baxter wrote how depression could be rooted in a psychological cause. It could also be born of emotional trauma. It could seep from moral guilt or even be oppressed upon someone by demonic and spiritual warfare. And he writes about this in 1844, where he's realizing, hey, there's different components to this, and we have to make sure we're speaking life, pointing people to Jesus, because the truth is, laughter and a cheerful spirit are a really good thing. They're a gift for healthy, long living, and the joy of the Lord is our strength and helps us get through this. And so the New Testament writers talk about this. Philippians 4:4, rejoice in the Lord always. 1 Thessalonians 5, rejoice always and give thanks. Romans 14 describes God's kingdom as one that's built on righteousness, peace, and joy. And so just to clarify, and we'll keep going, joy is not the denial of hardship. We can acknowledge hey, life's difficult, but it's a spirit-formed characteristic of Christ. It's part of the fruit of the Spirit. It's who you are in Christ.
Yeah.
And circumstances can't take that from you when you're in the Lord.
Good word. Verse 23, the wicked accept bribes in secret to pervert the course of justice. So we know this, verse 8 talked about this, bribes are wrong, wicked people are bought off. This is also just like a good reminder when it comes to holiness and how we're supposed to be, purity is so often tied to that, like the sexual nature of that word, where really this is a way that we can walk in purity too. I actually have lots of stories about this, doing mission work overseas, all over in different countries. I kind of had a really naive look about law enforcement growing up in the United States that, it was helpful, and if I needed help, go to them. And then I went to live overseas, and that was not the case. And it was very much, we're here and we might help you, but do you have anything to give us? If we just a very transactional. So this does happen. I don't know what it looks like in your life. I don't know what bribes look like in your, in your time now, but how are you walking in purity to the Lord? Because it's not helpful. And there's all kinds of different ways that we can actually pervert justice that do not honor the Lord. So a good reminder there.
Verse 24, a discerning person keeps wisdom in view, but a fool's eyes wander to the ends of the earth. And so the question I would ask you is, what's in your line of sight? Because where your eyes go, usually your feet follow. I recently shared a story about me almost losing my life in driver's ed, where the guy driving was talking and looked over his shoulder while he was driving the car, and naturally when he looks over his shoulder, his eyes move, and so does the steering wheel. And we veered off the road for a second. And that's true with life. What you look at, where you're focused on, where your gaze is fixed, is going to greatly influence and impact how you live your life and the direction of your life.
Yeah. A foolish son brings grief to his father and bitterness to his mother who bore him. That's verse 25. So this is similar again to verse 21. You read it other places in the Proverbs too. That parental relationship is so huge, and there's so many emotions entangled with it. Why I like this verse is because there is something that's so difficult we can grow weary in if you are a parent that has a wayward child. I have heard time and time again older saints at our church talk about how just keep praying. Yeah. Just keep trusting the Lord with them. Just keep offering them back to the Lord.
Sound like Dory.
And so that's a truth here that I would connect back to this verse is those relationships are hard, and just keep praying.
Yep.
Just keep praying.
Verse 26, almost done. If opposing a fine on the innocent is not good, surely to flog honest officials is not right. And so what this is getting at here is God's moral order is that the righteous would be rewarded and the wicked would be punished. If a leader is upright, they shouldn't be punished. Now, what's unfortunate is sometimes there are systems of justice or injustice in place, and bad people get away. People who have committed crimes get away, and the wrong people are accused and incarcerated or whatever. And so that's not God's heart. I wish it was different this side of heaven. One day he'll come and right all wrongs.
Yeah. Verse 27, the one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered. This is a good one. So if you have ever been in a moment of conflict or...
Never.
I know, right? Or if you even have observed, other folks and what's going on, you can see someone who is even-tempered is often quiet. I have seen older saints in the Lord. Again, I have so grown to appreciate people in the church that have white hair because they have gone through something. And so, when they're getting toward those later years of life, there's so many good things to learn from these folks. But one of them often is if you have the chance to see them in a conversation, maybe it's getting heated, they're usually going to be quiet. Yeah. They're usually going to become good listeners. And so you can see, foolishness, you can often pick it out pretty quickly. Yeah. It's pretty loud. It's pretty in your face. It's pretty demanding. And so this is just a really good reminder that, people who have knowledge, they're often listening. Yep. They're actually, and if they are going to talk, it's usually something that you should pay attention to.
Yeah. Verse 28 just piggybacks this very thought and says, even fools are thought to be wise if they keep silent.
Exactly.
And discerning if they hold their own tongues and just stay quiet.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln once said, it's better to keep your mouth shut and let them think you a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. I heard that and I got a good laugh. James in James 1:19 talks about being quick to listen and slow to speak, and there is great wisdom there. Yep. So thank you for joining us today for Proverbs. I can't wait to keep going on this journey with you. We're a little over halfway, and we've got a number of chapters to still tackle. So God bless you, and stay tuned. We'll see you soon.
The Lord bless you and keep you. Don't make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give him his peace. Have a great day.